Good evening, America, and good morning, England. I would like to welcome you to the UNX Radio podcast, and I am your host, Brigitte Barclay. I'm very new to this, and this is To the Naked Truth. Tonight, we're going to be talking amongst friends, and it's going to be just a casual chat with a very, very good dear friend of mine and our journey together. I've known a Mr. Nick Pope for 27 years, and Nick, obviously, for all those household names that you know, he's very familiar within the English branch of ufology and obviously the American branch of ufology now, and his work within the government and all the TV shows that he represents, not just the ancient aliens. Right, so without further ado, I'm going to introduce Nick. I'll give you a little bit of background, but I know everybody knows everything about Nick. And Nick's background, he was a British government UFO project. He ran it from 1991 to 1994, and he researched, investigated UFOs and lots of paranormal and abduction experiences, and that is why we met. And we will talk about that later. So Nick has worked with various media, film personalities, the TV industry, and he's a great guy to know in ufology. He's always been there for me and many others, just to have that really fantastic question and answer. Right now, currently, he's on tour with Ancient Aliens and his team, and he'll talk about that later as well. So without further ado, as an experiencer, it's our journey, how we met, of where Nick is now, where ufology was in England, and where it is now. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce my good friend for 27 years, Mr. Nick Pope.
Hi there, B. Great to see you. Good to be on the show.
Oh, wowza. Hello, you. I know, right? This is surreal. 27 years later, we didn't realize this, did we? But now the tables turn. So now I'm going to ask you those questions. But anyway, greetings from here in not so sunny England, and you in New York. And I'm sure that we'll hear all the taxi cabs, the ambulances, and all of the fire things all going off. Good old New York. So are you enjoying New York?
Absolutely loving it. And I think a lot of people, when I say we've moved to New York, they're like, oh, you mean upstate New York? And I'm like, no, we mean New York City. When I say New York, I mean New York. We are on 7th Avenue, about 5 minutes walk from Times Square, right in the heart of it.
Oh, I know. I hope you sleep at night.
Yes, and we have a view of the Empire State Building from our apartment window. I mean, it's just fabulous being here.
It's amazing, and also because you've got a really good pass with New York, with Bud Hopkins, Peter Robbins, Linda Cortilli. So it must be really lovely to be back on sort of like an old stomping ground for you.
Yes, a lot of history here for us, and I'm sure we can get into that.
Yeah. So, right, without further ado, obviously, I am an experiencer, and back in 1996, I came to a conference in Bristol, and that is where I met you. And that's how we started our journey together. I wanted somebody to talk to about my experiences out in Los Angeles in Brentwood, 1993, February 93. And you took the time to listen to me because you work with you were working with media at the time, and you were working within abduction scenarios, not so much abduction scenarios, but abduction scenarios. I spoke with you, and I had started up a witness support group, and like any media back then, it was poo-pooed. We all saw green men, and they all I wore a tinfoil hat, right? So I put an article in our local paper to start a witness support group, and they misconstrued it. So I thought, well, hang on a minute, there is a guy that's at the Ministry of Defence, works there, and still you'd stopped because it was 94 when you stopped, but you're still working within the Ministry of Defence at Whitehall, and you corrected them. So without further ado, you can, my story is your story, so you know my story very, very well.
I do. And I mean, I was glad to help. As you say, my time on the UFO project was 91 through to 94, but I was still in the Ministry of Defense. And obviously I was still talking to the people doing that particular work. And I was involved because by then my name had come out. I had already written a couple of books, I think, which had to go through the Ministry of Defense security clearance process, but one on UFOs, one on abductions. And you came to me, and the way I recall it is you were aggrieved at the way that this had been either misunderstood or misrepresented, or a bit of both.
Misrepresented, yeah.
Yeah, by the journalist. And you'd asked me to intervene and sort of have a conversation and say, look, this isn't all just sort of silly season sci-fi tinfoil hat stuff. There are those of us at the Ministry of Defense working on this issue, and whatever is going on, there are people who are having these experiences, and this should not be belittled or dismissed. It is worthy of serious scientific and academic study. And I think we got, as I recall, not exactly a retraction, but a follow-up, really, putting it in a much better light. And it was, you obviously still are very sort of persistent. I won't say pushy. Oh gosh, I've said it. And obviously you wanted to leverage, and rightly, understandably, my insider knowledge and experience of this with the journalist to basically correct them. And it was one of those cases where the journalist was honest enough to say, okay, mea culpa, I got it wrong. I had no idea that the Ministry of Defense was doing this. Yes. And now we know differently, of course, and this whole subject is transitioning from fringe to mainstream. But that's as it were the start of our journey on this.
Yeah, because I think you said feisty and tenacious. But actually, it wasn't back then. But I still am feisty and tenacious. You know that, and obviously, someone having an experience, it's never going to erase out of your mind. So you will fight to, like people are still now talking about their experiences till, even if they've had one-off encounters. Oh, there's me and you at Graham Birdsall's conference in 2001. Little young sparrows were we.
Right.
2001. Yeah, that's when we first spoken. John Mack was there as well. Who else was there? John Mack. I remember John Mack. Was Stephen Greer there? I think Stephen Greer was at that one as well.
Sometimes these events all blur into one, but I know it was a big, important conference. And of course, the conference that the Birdsalls put on was the biggest conference of its kind in the UK. Certainly, there was nothing else quite like it in the UK. You'd have to go to the US to find something on the same scale.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, so in some ways, this is where I want people like from the American side that will be listening to this, and obviously the English side here. Ufology in England back then was really, really difficult. We didn't have the internet like we had, so you'd be handwriting letters, you'd be waiting for replies back. Like I've still got your original letters, I've kept everyone's original letters. You had lots of very, very good people within it. Like you had the Ken Phillips, Jenny Randalls, Timothy Good, Roy Dutton, Gloria Dixon, and your very good friend Georgina Brulé, who wrote the book You Can't Tell the People.
Yes. I struggle to think of how Georgina managed to track down all those witnesses to the Rendlesham Forest incident before the days of the internet. I mean, she did, I think but she did actually, she has a very storied past, but one of the things she did was train as a private detective. So it's no wonder. I mean, a lot of the body of knowledge we now have on Rendlesham is because she tracked down the witness. She forced the Ministry of Defense to declassify and release their file on it. I mean, she's one of the great heroes of this subject. She is.
And what do you think of her thoughts now in regards to ufology? I mean, everyone upstairs must be thinking, oh my God. Actually, I think that they are the basis of building this to help us all right now, I think.
Well, this is vindication for them. And you can look at all those people that have passed on, whether it's people like Georgina Bruni, whether it's people like J. Allen Hynek, Bud Hopkins, John Mack, James MacDonald, Edward Ruppelt, Donald Kehoe. You go back to the golden era, John Keel, many of these classic names.
All of their books are here.
Yes, absolutely. And anyone in this subject today is standing on the shoulders of those giants and the work that they did before it was easy, before social media, before the internet, when they had to get out phone books and go through and call dozens, if not hundreds of people in a row until they got the right person, and then convince them to stay on the line and tell their story. I mean, and that's just the first contact, if you'll excuse the pun. So yeah,
you got that in.
Sure. Yeah. For those people, what's happening now, particularly in the United States, with NASA doing a study, with multiple UFO provisions in the defense bill, with Congress holding hearings, this is the fringe to mainstream transition that they have worked so hard to achieve. So this is their achievement.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, if we didn't have the background for all of that, I mean, and also they took the time to, back in the days, you'd visit the people, wouldn't you? It's not, I mean, okay, fair enough. Modern technology, me and you are having a chat now, but time and space to be with that person and to spend a week with that person, interviewing that person, was phenomenal at the time. And I think there isn't. That's not as, in a lot of people's research, is not as important. I'd sooner someone take the time and go and spend that time with that person, as opposed to just from what you read in a book, because there's so much more information when you meet that person, right?
Well, absolutely. There's no substitute for boots on the ground and sitting opposite the person, looking into their eyes, not just pinging a few emails back and forward. Not just having the odd Zoom call, not that there's anything wrong with doing that to fact check things and to flesh out the details, but you don't really get a sense of someone's story, who they are, what their experience is, until you actually spend time with them. Yeah.
Well, I feel like I'm a newsreader because I have brought notes, and this is my first podcast, and obviously, you're my first guest. Thank you. So, right. So what I would like to talk about is our meeting in Bristol, and then us talking about when we spoke at the first Leeds, and then we're going to go forward to the second Leeds conference that we spoke at. So, from an experiencer's point of view, and you had worked with other abductees, and you were reading other case notes of abductees, why? There wasn't many people, I don't think, in England that had come forward. So do you, how do you feel about, was there any other cases that had come to you that you can speak about back in England, back in the day, besides myself?
There were a few, but it was very difficult because, as you know, there was
ridicule.
Back in those days, there was a lot of stigma attached to it. There was a lot of stigma attached to UFO reports. So if you figure that people were reluctant to speak out about a UFO sighting because of the fear of ridicule or disbelief, you know better than most how much more difficult it was for people to talk about an abduction experience. So even when I had written Open Skies, Closed Minds, I mean, literally #3 hardback nonfiction bestseller in the UK on UFOs. And I was doing my follow-up book on abductions, The Uninvited. I struggled to find maybe half a dozen people who would let me come and meet them to do that deep dive that I needed. Because what I decided to do is the first half of the book, I was telling the history of this, going right back to the folklore, then fast forwarding through the contactees of the 50s and the 60s, but then the abductees, Antonio Villas-Boas, Betty and Barney Hill, Travis Walton, but in the second half of the book, I wanted to let 5 or 6 individuals just have their own say. And what was interesting about that was that very often they were accounts that didn't fit the mold. Some parts of the experience did. But what it brought home to me, as somebody who had looked at this first from within government and then in a private capacity, was the richness of the diversity of these reports. Sure, some common themes and threads drawing them together, but bizarre, surreal, almost abstract points. And it was quite a struggle for me to persuade, like I say, about half a dozen people. I wish we'd known each other back then, because you would have been a whole chapter. Well, you would have been a whole book. But
we were going to do a book.
Well, yes, we were. But so I don't want to talk in great detail about those cases.
Yeah,
not
of
least
course.
because it's been a while since I was in touch with any of those people. But they were very courageous people for doing what they did and speaking out. I know I had Maria Ward in there, for example, and I know it was difficult to get them, because with all of these people, I made a decision, going back to what we were talking about, that I wouldn't just interview them over the telephone. I would go and spend time with them, and then go and follow up if needs be. If I felt there was a gap in the narrative, if I didn't understand something, if I felt that there was an inconsistency or something, I wasn't afraid to ask some hard questions. So I wrote it up, and it too became a bestseller. I think it got to number 9 or number 10. And funnily enough, I have no idea why. Maybe because they've just done an Audible version of it. But The Uninvited has just exploded back into the bestseller list. So
fantastic.
Yeah, people who want to take a look at some of those old UK cases can do so.
We had Ripplestone Farm, didn't we? On Encounters, Steven Spielberg's latest series, and I loved the last year when I took it on holiday, the book The Uninvited. So the other uninvited, not your uninvited, but
no, the
Clive Harold book, about Ripplestone Farm. So that was phenomenal. So that was I mean, I think I have to say, I absolutely love all of the older cases, because the high strangeness in all of them. And I know, being an experiencer, and many other experiencers will know, it just isn't UFOs. It is the high strangeness that goes with it. And that's just, I mean, I got, as I said that, the whole of my legs, my hairs on my legs just go.
Well, we can, we can get into, if you like.
Yeah, we are going to.
About some of your own experiences and what is it about your own case that intrigued me so much.
Intrigued, yes. Nice, very well.
That interested me, not intrigued me. But
thank you.
But yes,
right.
Bit of both.
Bit of both. Right. Well, okay. So first of all, we will talk about that in a minute. But obviously, you went to MIT, so you went to the conference there, the proceedings, and you got me the really lovely book, The Proceedings of the Abduction Story Conference. So tell me, back then, how important it was, and it was probably very, very far-fetched, but actually those conferences really need to be taking place now, because it's time to wake up really now for lots of people, not just experiences, but for people within the government to listen to experiences. Oh my God, I got goosebumps all over my body as I said that.
Well, I think there are 2 points. Firstly, 100%, it's impossible to overstate the contribution that John Mack made to this subject by being a professor of psychiatry at Harvard Medical School, who, instead of dismissing all this as hysteria and psychological delusion, said, we as scientists and academics ought to be having a proper look at this, and then we see what we think, because that's the way science works.
I mean, the size of this book is absolutely immense. It's so bloody heavy. Look at that.
Yes.
The size of that. It's absolutely amazing.
Yes. So what the point was that here was he had won the Pulitzer Prize for his biography of T.E. Lawrence of Arabia, called Prince of Our Disorder. And here he was turning his attention to the alien abduction mystery. And to cut a long story very, very short, he concluded that instead of being psychological delusions or repressed memories of childhood sexual abuse. He said, I believe these encounters are are taking place as these people are reporting them. And that although he was always very wary of using this word because he said it was quite fluid, he said these encounters are real. And, Ralph Blumenthal, the New York Times reporter who, along with Leslie Kean and Helene Cooper, broke the story of ATIP and the US Navy videos in the New York Times, Ralph Blumenthal recently wrote an excellent biography of John Mack called The Believer. Ooh. And it's fascinating. And history is repeating itself, as it often does, because now you've got Avi Loeb, professor of astrophysics at Harvard, who is perhaps leading the charge, along with Michio Kaku, in academia and in the scientific community, saying we should look at UFOs seriously. But back in the day, John Mack was doing this at Harvard, and of course there were those who attacked him for it.
Yeah, of course.
And again, another fascinating connection is that when some people at Harvard tried to censor him over this, he fought back. Who was one of his legal representatives? Danny Sheehan, famous not just for the Pentagon Papers, but for also representing Luis Elizondo in his struggles. So what is amazing about this subject is how everything connects with everything else.
Well, it's connecting the dots, isn't it, again, and so do you foresee, another conference like that? Because it was remarkable of its day, and it should be happening again, just solely on abduction, but within the science community and within the academic community.
It will come. I think at the moment there is so much focus on the nuts and bolts of UAP.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm going to call it UFO still. I don't like it. Don't like it. I'm old school. UFOs.
Okay. Well, but there's still so much focus on that it is difficult, I think, for people to shift the narrative and bring in the abduction phenomenon. That there is a difficulty. Look, I've used this phrase before, and I'll use it again. We've finally got Congress genuinely interested in UFOs, holding hearings, issuing reports, doing studies, doing investigations. If you suddenly say to them, and now let's talk about the alien abductions, you're going to, at the moment, I think you will lose some of that congressional audience, because some of them, now,
I know. I get what you're saying. Yeah.
I don't say that it's right, and I understand that a lot of abductees and experiencers are probably upset about it, but it's a tactical move. They can legitimately associate themselves with UFOs and frame it as a freedom of information issue, a defense issue, a national security issue, and a flight safety issue.
But they had said in the hearings, congressional hearings, the suggestion that people have been harmed or threatened.
Yeah.
So, that was a big statement, wasn't it?
They're sneaking it in through the back door, though that statement may also apply to intimidation and maybe worse of UFO witnesses. They're sneaking it in. They occasionally, one of the ATIP papers talks about human effects.
Yeah, and I was going to say the radiation, physical effects.
The radiation.
So that's why they're not probably bringing in the sort of like the breeding program and various things.
There, but they've got to be careful. It's a classic case of small moves. That's what we need. Softy, catchy monkey.
Okay. Dear me. Right. Okay. So what about here in England then? Who's, it's been talked about, and we've spoke about this at Manchester a month and a half ago. we are a little bit more behind here in England, and
big
which
time.
is and yet I think we were more prominent years ago. Like I said, with the old school and the conferences, we were so much bigger at conferences than you were American side, So who's helping us this side in the government, in Parliament?
Well, there are certainly, I think there are a number of lobby groups and individual researchers coming together to try and do this.
Like who?
Like, well, the what do they call it? Is it UAP Studies Network? But also, of course, although they go back years and years, presumably the
UFORA,
British UFO Research Association are still in there. But it's going to take somebody in Parliament to step up, because all this in the United States, it only started. Look, it started with the New York Times article. But then what it took is a lot of congressional representatives to say, wait, you told us there wasn't a program, and now we read in our newspaper that there is. Well, it's going to need someone in Parliament, probably both in the Lords and the Commons, to step up and ask questions and get the Defense Committee to hold a hearing on this and hold the Ministry of Defense to account on this, because until members of Parliament do that, they're just going to fob everyone off with the standard replies that I was writing to people myself back in the 90s.
Will they bring you in? Will they bring you back in?
They might,
because you used to talk publicly, obviously not just when you were at the UFO desk, but you used to openly go and speak with people within the government, and you used to do lots of talks. You did loads of talks with lots of different companies
I've talked obviously within various government bodies. I've talked at the Science Museum. I've talked at the Royal Aeronautical Society.
So we need that to happen here again.
We do. Now, I'm not saying it's all about me, but well,
I want it to be. I want you to be back over this side of the pond, because I feel that we just haven't got the representation over here at all.
Put it this way: when I did live in the UK, and when I was particularly when I was still working at the Ministry of Defence, even no longer on the UFO project, I could continue to have those conversations in government. But then I took early retirement from the MOD in 2006. I moved to the United States in 2012. Now, I had already been involved with the declassification and release of almost 60,000 pages of declassified Ministry of Defense files and documents on UFOs, many of which I've written.
I'm going to hold you there, right?
Okay.
Because we're going to have to go into a commercial break, and we will be back shortly with myself, Brigitte Barclay, and Mr. Nick Pope.
Are you thinking about purchasing a wood-fired heating or cooking appliance but don't know where to start? The new book, Wood-Fired Heating and Cooking, will guide you through the process and make the decision much easier. Find out about wood stoves, wood-burning fireplace inserts, masonry heaters, cook stoves, brick ovens, and more. Learn about operation and maintenance, buying and storing wood, even how to make your own charcoal. A bonus section includes delicious recipes for cooking in a wood-burning oven, grill, tandoori oven, or smoker. The wise homeowner, prepper, or homesteader will have the ability to heat their home with wood when the power goes out, or to save money on increasing gas bills. Wood-Fired Heating and Cooking is available at Amazon. Visit www.woodfiredpub.com for more information. That's woodfiredpub.com.
It's almost here, ladies and gentlemen. The UNX Network Year 2 anniversary at XCon 2023. XCon is being held this year from October the 30th to November 1st at the beautiful Oasis Hotel and Conference Center in Springfield, Missouri. Top speakers include host of America Unearthed, Scott Walter, plus Haley Ramsey, Sev Tak, UNX's very own Maureen Richmond and Dan Terry, Mindy Toutfest, Harriet McFeely, Forrest Crawford, and many more. And they're all coming to deliver new information on topics like UFOs, alien encounters, cryptids, and ancient secrets, and real hauntings from the afterlife. Join us for the film premiere of A Haunting in Blue Hill. And don't miss the Mad Hatter Paranormal Halloween Bash, Banquet, and Costume Contest on All Hallows Eve, October 31st. So join us as we close out the 2023 conference season. Info and tickets are available now at unxnetwork.com. That's unxnetwork.com, and we'll see you there.
Hi there, welcome back to the my new show, which is called The Naked Truth, and it is on UnX Radio, and it is a new podcast. And I am currently talking with Mr. Nick Pope, an old friend of mine for 27 years. And Race, this is a message for you to give to Margie. I want that white fireplace, please. I want the big white fireplace that I saw on that advert. It looks amazing. Actually, I want pretty much all of them. So I will happily advertise them. Right. So where were we? We were talking about in England here, and you, who are we going to get to be a spokesperson for us?
Yeah, it's difficult because, as I say, I was involved in this when I was in government, and I was able to have those conversations. Then I was involved in the program to declassify and release the UFO files. But then once, and that was a big story, but then I left the UK, and I wasn't, I mean, of course I could still come back from time to time and do some media, but really
you hop all everywhere. You're everywhere. So
yeah. Well, there needs to be a new spokesperson, and I don't see why it can't be you. So I'll throw that into the conversation.
I am so sorry. I'm not that academic, I'm afraid. I am just the girl next door. So no chance.
Well, you've got a deep specialist knowledge of the subject that few have. So
yes, but it doesn't store like it does with you. That's for sure.
And also, arguably, this subject needs more female voices.
Oh yeah, definitely. So, I couldn't agree more. I could not agree more. Yeah, definitely.
But it's that whether it's one person or whether it's a coalition of people, I think that's we need somehow, or you need somehow, to kickstart this in the UK. And as I was saying before the break, to get British parliamentarians involved, because it was only pressure from within Congress that forced the Pentagon and the intelligence community to take action on this. And it may start with just a single member of parliament, and then somebody else will come in, and then another, and then another. But it's got to start somewhere.
Well, of course, as Bud Hopkins said, that you've got to start somewhere. There's a beginning, there's a middle, and there's an end. Well, there isn't really an end right now because we don't see what's going to be happening in the future. But there you go. Good, Bud. Right. Okay. So, yes, that was me and you. That was in 1998 when we went over to work with Bud Hopkins in New York. That was in what was that? No, that was in 2014. That was at the Exopolitics conference with Richard Dolan, Steve Bassett, Kim Carlsberg. All the players were there. There we are. When cameras on phones weren't that great. Anyway, yeah, right. So So I will say to people, because if people don't know me, because we're talking to an American audience, and I find that quite fascinating, that obviously I've had lots of encounters growing up, but my encounter and why I came to you to speak with you and to work with you was because my encounter happened on a busy freeway in Los Angeles when I lived out in Los Angeles as a makeup artist. You can go to my website, which is www.brigittebarclay.com, and it's all going to be at the bottom. And I'm sure Race will put all of the links up, but it will tell you about my journey with my encounter in Los Angeles. So my encounter happened in broad daylight. Yes, hard to believe, I know, in a place called Brentwood, Los Angeles, on a freeway. Yes, Ray said there's a cornfield there. Yes, I know. Ray said there's a cornfield there, but that was the craft that I saw that was above me with another witness. Long story, not going to go into it now because I want Nick to talk, but that's how I came about getting in contact with Nick, because my encounter happened that involved, after seeing that craft, some while after, a period of probably 5, 10, 15 minutes, it involved a black, like Men in Black car. And it also involved then military helicopters going towards UCLA College, hence why I'm wearing my UCLA. I love my UCLA College. I only wear it because it's to do with my UFO encounter. Had military helicopters going to intercept it. So our first meeting back in Bristol at the time in 96 was, hey, this is my encounter. Oh my God, I got goosebumps saying it. This is my encounter. It happened in broad daylight, Men in Black car, military helicopters. And that's how we got involved. Now, which was interesting, and our journey with going to Bud Hopkins. So as an experiencer and other experiences that are going to be listening to you and myself, we decided to go to work with Bud Hopkins and alongside Peter Robbins as well, and for 5 days in New York. And it was 3 days for me with hypnosis. I will make it clear that you sat in under the hypnosis. You didn't take any hypnosis whatsoever, but you sat in the my hypnosis sessions alongside Bud Hopkins, and it was audio taped.
Yes, I was there really as an observer and somebody outside the bubble, so to speak, a sort of extra set of eyes on this. And of course, I knew your backstory, and I don't know how much you want to get into this or how much time we've got to get into this. But of course, as you said earlier, and it's a point that I've seen again and again in my own research and investigation, these are never one-off experiences. There's always a backstory, and your backstory involved childhood encounters. For example, the figure who glided strangely at the end of the back yard.
I listened to that a bit today, and Hush, you found the clip for it, didn't you? For Buffy the gentleman.
I found the clip. Yeah, because you told me about this strange figure moving in an unnatural way as if it was gliding on rails. And I said, well, look, you couldn't have known about this because it wasn't out at the time. But there's an episode of Buffy where there's something that...
Well, I wasn't into Buffy.
No. And so I sent you the clip and I said, look, you need to sit down before you watch this. And because it...
Have a cigarette.
It will freak you out. And you were quite chilled by it because so there was the story of the little Chinese girl in the gazebo where there shouldn't have been and wasn't a gazebo or a Chinese girl. So these are all possibly screen memories, which is one reason why, of course, you wanted to work with Bud Hopkins to say, look, if those are screen memories, what actually happened? What was this? If it wasn't a gazebo in the middle of the village where there was no gazebo, could it have been something else? If there wasn't a little Chinese girl in the village, which there wasn't, who or what could she have been? And who was this mysterious figure? So we spent a lot of time with Bud Hopkins, and I must say, I mean, of course, as everyone knows, there are disagreements about the true nature of the hypnotic state and the memories that are resurface as a result of this. But be that as it may, this session was extremely, or these sessions were extremely interesting in putting flesh on the bones and maybe helping you. And this is, I think, central to Bud's, as much as Bud wanted to solve the mystery.
Because he had the Intruders Foundation at the time.
Yeah.
Alongside Peter Robbins.
Well, like Bud and like John Mack, his primary aim was actually not so much solving the mystery, though that would be a nice bonus, but helping the individuals come to terms with their experiences and contextualize them in relation to their own lives.
Yeah, that's a nice word. Contextualize them. Oh gosh, wow, yeah. Well, I mean, we go back to the Chinese girl. For me, the memories is when I had the hypnosis, it just put everything back in its place, because there were little things. If you remember me gripping something and then jumping down, that vividly came back, as if I can see you as visually now. For the freeway, the Los Angeles freeway, it's debatable when people say to me, well, hang on a minute. And I've had a few people say it to me, broad daylight, middle of Los Angeles, 101, 405 freeway underneath me, the Holiday Inn to the left of me, lots of people in the Holiday Inn, because I think you said to me at the time it was a restaurant up at the top, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
And
you often go past it. Yeah.
Still,
because it's
I've
changed
eaten
hands,
there.
isn't it? Yeah. Well, I've been there many a times. So yeah, it was, but you can't take away when you've had an experience, the body functional feeling that you have with it. So when I, and nobody sort of, people that are listening to me for the first account, obviously, the backstory, and you'd have to go onto the website to look at it and watch our YouTube video. There'll be a link to our YouTube video on it. You get the feeling that goes with it. And then boom, when we were having the hypnosis with Bud, that feeling's there again. And then boom, something happened, got goosebumps as I say it again, and it just put all of the pieces. And what, I won't give anyone anything away, but the insight of what I saw, whether it could be through a dream state, through the hypnosis state, which, not just me have had hypnosis. There's lots and lots of other experiences that have had hypnosis, that, it is true. We don't know where we are in the state of hypnosis, and we don't know if they are real memories or not real memories, but something very real is happening to us as we are resurfacing them. That's for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think the abductees and the experiencers are, as a group, people with very little to gain and an awful lot to lose very often.
Oh yeah, we've all, I mean, relationships, we've all got our stories to tell, relationships you've lost, friends that you've lost, families that members that you've fallen out with. I was very fortunate to have, both my brothers and some members of my family to have UFO experiences. So, but, there are people that have just had the one-off encounters and ridiculed. But now, not so much. We don't all have tinfoil hats.
No. And if from all the things going on in the United States right now, whether it's the NASA studies, whether it's the reports from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, whether it's the congressional hearing, let's fast forward a while. Let's suppose we do get first discovery, first contact, disclosure, whatever phraseology people want to use. I think it will bring, once we've got past, as Stanton Friedman used to say, never mind the saucer, did you see the driver? And it's like the focus will shift. If we get this revelation that we are not alone and that we are being visited, say, then we get to the next order questions. Okay, who are these people? Who or what are they? Are they biological? Are they AI? What's their agenda? What are they doing? And did anyone within government know anything about this? And once we get into those questions, I think there may well be a massive vindication for people who've had these experiences. And I talked earlier, we mentioned Danny Sheehan. I did a TV show called After Contact about the societal implications of all this. We did an episode on legal implications. And Danny
Oh,
and I
yeah,
were
right.
discussing, well, we talked about, for example, maybe a class action with all the abductees, or some sort of truth and reconciliation commission for all the people who were ridiculed over the years.
Well, gosh, well, that'd be something. But the thing is, there's sort of like two different worlds, isn't there? You've got congressional hearings, and then you've got TV shows, you know, that are out now. Let's say Steven Spielberg's New Encounters. You know, that's it was in Zimbabwe as well, wasn't it? The second episode, and it had John Mack on it, actually. You know, you've got that out in the media, and then you've got Congress. But hang on a minute, the two aren't going together yet. You know, so it's like there's two different worlds of ufology right now. You know, there's all of us doing our podcast as well. You know, talking about, you know, the various elements of it, but then we're not all gelling together. For Congress, it's about the pilots, and it's about, you know, flying into their aerospace, and, you know, the threats and all of that. But hang on a minute, at what point are we actually going to say, listen, we got to all understand this?
That's the next conversation, but I don't think it's the current conversation. I mentioned earlier this idea that Congress are easing their way into this in a way that they can do without getting any political fallout in terms of ridicule. And the way, yeah, absolutely, the way into that subject, their foot in the door is, as you say, through the pilots and the radar operators. Now, eventually, they're going to have to get further into the room and talk to the people who are having these experiences. But at the moment, they just have their foot in the door, and the foot in the door is the pilots and the radar operators. But they're getting there, and they're getting there through people, through whistleblowers like David Brush.
Yeah. Yeah. So what do you, okay, so we'll talk about Congress then. So what is happening your side, like in the last week? Update us.
Okay, well, we have interest in Congress, both in the Senate and in the House, so the two parts of Congress. And that interest is split around at least 3 different areas of committees: the intelligence committees, the armed services committees, and the oversight committees. So in one sense, this is good news because we've got a lot of areas involved. But in one sense, it's a problem because there's no single point of contact here. And there's a bit of a danger that things are going to fall between the cracks. But we've got that going on. We've got more whistleblowers coming forward, and we've got the Pentagon's own unit, Arrow, doing investigations as well.
So when do you foresee some more whistleblowers going forward?
Well, they're coming forward now. There was a report the other day from a very well-connected journalist called Michael Schallenberger, suggesting that there are between 30 and 50 individuals waiting in the wings. Some of them have come forward and told their stories. Some have yet to tell their stories. But obviously,
and that's just 50. That's just 50. No, I'm just saying that's just 50. That's a lot to hear. But my God, look at all of the others that are behind them, just waiting.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, they've all got to be vetted. And the problem with a lot of this is that if these people genuinely have, as some of them claim, worked on these highly classified, deeply compartmentalized legacy programs pertaining to crash retrievals and reverse engineering, there may only be 8 people in government that they can actually tell, the so-called Gang of 8, the people with the highest security clearances, because these are special access programs, and it may go further than that. Some of the allegations are that these are completely off the books programs, illegal programs. We'll see. But there's a lot going on right now.
So when you're talking illegal programs, are you talking about sort of like the military abductions? You know, let's just talk about you've got Carla Turner, you've got Leah Haley, that was a wife to a member of a military personnel that was having military abductions. Is that what you're sort of saying, or?
I'm talking more about the idea that maybe some of this was passed into the private sector. So it's what you're talking about is part of it. But one of the big rumors, of course, that's been around for years is that the government made it much more difficult for people to do the congressional oversight and use the Freedom of Information Act by passing this into the private sector via defense corporations, big aerospace companies. And investigative journalists like Ross Coulthard have suggested that these companies are now trying to divest themselves of this and give it back, because one of the things that's going to be in the new defense bill for 2024 is a requirement of so-called eminent domain, where the government will retake possession of any materials, including biological material, that they have on this. And when you read a 64-page amendment from the Senate majority,
because that's still laughed about, biological entities,
But when you read that 64-page amendment to the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2024, and you see the phrase non-human intelligences written into it in the congressional record, you realize just how much the landscape and the conversation has changed over the last few years.
So for yourself, obviously now you're doing your Ancient Alien tour, very, very super busy, running back to LA, going to all the different states out in America with your Ancient Alien tour. Yay! Look at you guys. You look like cowboys. Let me tell you, I hope you tell Travis that I'm his #1 fan. I am his #1 fan, because what I like about that is the fact is he had no clue what he was walking into. No clue whatsoever.
Well, he's a great guy.
Yeah,
he's super smart. And of course, what a lot of people didn't know, and maybe outside of the US still don't know, is that when Jay Stratton was director of the UAP task force, so the body that came before the Pentagon's Arrow unit, which has the lead now, he brought Travis Taylor on to be the chief scientist. So he's done this from inside the government as well. So, but we're having great fun with Ancient Aliens Live. It's a 90-minute stage show based on the hit TV series. We've done about 25, 30 shows so far. We've got another 20, 25 in the calendar.
You love it. You love it.
Well, the first director of the BBC, Director General, John Reith, said good content must both educate, inform, and entertain.
Yes.
And that's what we try and do with Ancient Aliens Live and with Ancient Aliens.
Yeah, actually, and that's what I would say. You've got people that are not as interested, like myself, for personal reasons. And you've got the people that are at home just flicking through the TV. And they may see something, there's a bit of Graham Hancock on the TV or a bit of Eric von Daniken. And then, oh, hang on a minute, I used to read that book. And that will draw them in. So hence why a lot of people put down the Skinwalkers Ranch new series. I think it's not so much now, but I think it's absolutely amazing, because we'll go back to Travis, that, he was a non-believer. And then as soon as he get there, he's having these experiences and of the high strangeness that all go hand in hand. And as we know, I mean, that's a phenomena in its own right, I mean, forget having a craft, 45-foot craft above your head, military helicopters, and then you get the high strangeness with it as well. And then you've got to keep going on with everyday life. The fact that it is being reported that at the Skinwalkers Ranch, it's all being taped. They're doing all the different experiments. It's just fascinating to see, because my brother, Paul, he's like, oh my God, I absolutely love Skinwalker. So it's putting it out to the general public that wouldn't not necessarily be watching it. So, and it's drawing them in, and then they're thinking, hang on a minute, so it's fantastic. So future wise, how do you see, and what do you foresee yourself doing? Where would you like to be? What would you like to be doing?
Well, I think
Besides speaking on another podcast with me.
Yeah, I want to continue doing what I'm doing now. I'm lucky enough to have a mainstream news media platform here in the US. When a UFO story breaks, I'm often invited onto the TV news to kind of unpack that story in sort of 3.5 to 5 minute little piece. And as we move forward, we're going to get the full NASA report that's coming in the fall. We're going to get another update from the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, ARROW, in the Department of Defense. We are going to get almost certainly more congressional hearings and more whistleblowers. We will probably get more US Navy and maybe wider US military DVDs, films, taken by the forward-looking infrared cameras that we've already seen some. There's more of that to come. So I want to continue both going on the road with a stage show like Ancient Aliens Live, so that we
coming
can
over here as well, talking.
Well, I'll try, but it's like you say, some people will read a scientific paper on this, but some people will never read a scientific paper on this, but they'll watch a TV show. So I want to cover all the bases on this. I want to both educate, inform, and entertain, and I will continue to do that in newspapers, in magazine articles, mainly on television, and of course live and in person when I do live events.
So now then, what will it involve for you for your Ancient Aliens? Because what was the word? I listened to your podcast with Jimmy Church. What was the word that you used? The English word that made me laugh. Issues? Is it issues?
Oh, yes. People always rib me about when I say the issue here is. But look, I will continue to move forward. Ancient Aliens has been renewed for another season. It's almost record breaking now. The stage show, like I say, we've got many more dates in the diary for fall and for spring and summer 2024, and we're reaching a lot of people, and we're having a conversation with the American people, but also. When we do shows like this through the British people, the Canadians, Australians, New Zealanders, this is global. There are people who are going to be watching this outside of the US and the UK. And so it's important to remember that when we do these things in the 21st century, we're reaching the world with this and maybe beyond.
let that be the closing line for this. So Nick, I want to say a huge thank you. I am definitely going to get you back on again, because I think there's loads of things that we could talk about. And I would like to thank Nick Pope for being my first guest, my very best friend for 27 years, and always being there within the abduction scenario for someone to talk to. He's been a great support, and you can follow him and go to his website. You can join him, and I'm sure Race will put everything on the page for nickpope.net to contact him on if he needs any more work. I don't think he does, because he's really busy. So thank you from me. Brigitte Barclay, to the Naked Truth at unxnetwork.com, and thank you. And next week I am going to be speaking with Preston Dennett. See you later. Bye from England.